Are you related to Stephen Colbert?
I kind of wish, but, my family goes by Colbert, and there's ancestry in there because of slave owners. They were owned by French slave owners. And so afterwards, they wanted to change it to Colbert because they didn't want to keep that as their slave name.
We sit down with Jordan Colbert, a Yale University accessibility leader. Together, we explore how identity, disability, race, and lived experience intersect to shape the way people navigate education, work, and society.
It's the technology that helps people learn independently. And so being able to have, that psychotherapy where you're learning internally, the education where you're learning externally, and then the tools to actually teach you how to learn internally and externally, they're all parts of the puzzle that we have to put together. Being biracial in itself, I'm in between two places. I've been asked all throughout my life, what are you? My answer is always a human.
What can neurodivergence, accessibility, and intersectionality teach us about creating a more inclusive world? In this thought-provoking episode of the Real Roots and Resilience podcast, we sit down with Jordan Colbert. You'll learn why accessibility benefits everyone, how neurodiversity challenges traditional ways of thinking, and what it means to move beyond simply including people to truly valuing different ways of being, learning, and experiencing the world.
Welcome to Real Roots and Resilience podcast. Welcome.
Thank you. It's great to be here today.
So speaking of that, I see your name and I really want to call you Jordan Colbert. But really, it's Jordan Colbert, which is absolutely fine and amazing, and we celebrate it. But tell me, are you related to Stephen Colbert?
No, but I mean, I kind of wish, but I've gotten that for quite some time, ever since he became pretty famous. So, my family goes by Colbert, and there's ancestry in there because of slave owners. They were owned by French slave owners back during slavery times. And so afterwards, they wanted to change it to Colbert because they didn't want to keep that as their slave name. Mm-hmm. And, I didn't really know all that backstory back then. But up until high school, I got to high school, and that's when Stephen Colbert, jumped on the scene really. And my high school football coach, he loved that show. We had to put, our names on our helmets on the first day of practice. And he goes, "Colbert, come over here." And I said, "It's Colbert, sir." And he goes, "I don't care. It's Colbert." And so, high school football was different back then. And so that was what everybody called me in high school. And it was funny because my friends who had come up from, K through 8, they knew me as Colbert still. And they were like, "This is stupid." And I went to college, and I was like, you know what? Going back to Colbert, it's going to be good. Same exact thing happened because I played football. Mm-hmm. And so, at that point I said, you know what? I'm not going to fight it. Let's just let it be how it is. So I went for about 10 years after that as Colbert. Changed my voicemail, everything. Wow. My family would call and be like, "What? Well, Colbert, where did that come from?" Mm-hmm. And so, but then as I got older, I learned about the history and everything. And when I moved back to Connecticut, I was at a wedding, and my friend who knows me as Colbert, because he was a college friend, his cousin was like, "Is it Colbert or Colbert?" And I told him the story about the ancestry. I told this story, and he goes, "You know what? You're Colbert. Claim that." And ever since then, I've gone back to making sure that it is Colbert. And here I am, Jordan Colbert.
Yeah. Yes. And we are so happy to have you, Jordan Colbert. But it is interesting, the names people want to give us as opposed to who we really are. With a background in psychotherapy, education, and assistive technology, how do these worlds connect for you?
They're all actually playing off each other. I'll really say that because, as, clinicians and everything, psychotherapy, a big part of it is all about learning about yourself, getting insight, learning about your behaviors, those kind of things. And so being able to really look at that internally is where the psychotherapy world is something that like just really bleeds into education, because the learning aspect of learning about yourself is psychotherapy, what you do in the room with clinicians. But education is really where you take that and you learn about the external world. You bring the external world in, and that's when you start to get an idea and you develop your concepts of what the world is and what other people are giving you information and how you take that in and then play it out yourself. So like thinking about that, that is those two are really just married together in the sense of just that constant learning. Then when you bring technology into it, it's really technology has taken on such a way that we personalize it at this point. Really anything can be considered technology, whether it's, the rim of a cup, you add that handle to it. That handle is technology you've put on that cup to make it work better. And as assistive technology has grown, that's really a small subset of what technology is, but that's the technology that helps people. And in my world, it's the technology that helps people learn independently. And so being able to have, that psychotherapy where you're learning internally, the education where you're learning externally, and then the tools to actually teach you how to learn both internally and externally, they're all parts of the puzzle that we have to put together. So it really kind of naturally just happened that that's where all of my professional interests aligned.
I love that you use the word technology, because as we think about how we socialize ourselves, how we orient our relationship to things that have meaning in our life, there are different types of technology that one must activate to fully understand the depth of a thing.
100%.
I think in my journey, I'll talk a little bit about genealogy and DNA, how that's helped us. That's a form of technology we use to understand our connections literally to other people, right? And then even spiritually, when we think about frequency and the way frequency hits us through music, it's magnetic. It's something people can relate to. It's the way we resonate on higher levels. That's a form of technology that our body understands and connects us to sound. And the way that you're explaining it is almost as if, there's a deeper, like, physiological understanding of like who we are at our highest self, but it's some kind of way like becomes regulated in a system that is only understood or is only meant to understand so much. It's like sometimes the systems that we're in only want us to understand certain types of things, that there's a higher level or an access to knowledge within self that even the system doesn't want us to understand.
Yeah. And I mean, technology is really that conduit then that opens you to that underlying aspect that can allow you to be your best self.
Yeah.
Yes.
Exactly.
When you think about it in terms of that way, right? Like the vessel, the conduit to where I want to get.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
I think even in the education space, because we're talking about, the accessible services and things like that, there is a need for that level of awareness and support in the development of how we use the technology to serve people, even in their differences. But I'm celebrating you and applauding you for being that person that stood in the gap and saw that it was necessitous for us to hold space for people who lived and experienced life differently. Yeah. So thank you.
Yeah.
And funny enough, this is so great. As someone who identifies as biracial, first generation, and low income, that's what your bias is. So you can talk a little bit more. How does those identities, how do they shape you and your approach to accessibility and advocacy?
I mean, realistically, I think those three aspects of my identity, at least for me, are how I navigate the world. Because all three of those have their own things that come with them. their challenges, what, can be framed as successes, and really thinking about that gives me such a powerful perspective of the world. Being biracial in itself, I'm in between two places, always. And in many cases, people don't know what I am. I've been asked all throughout my life, what are you? My answer is always a human.
What are you?
Yeah, and that's how I look at it. And like people are always like taken aback when I say that, but like realistically, I operate in so many spaces because of that ambiguity. And so like I can understand what it's like to be a Black person in America, because there are times where no matter what happens, I am always considered a Black person. There are spaces where no matter what happens, I'm viewed as a white person. And I mean, those experiences and being able to be in both, I want to say, camps, gives me the perspective to see what other people in that camp see and what their struggles are, what their experiences are, and I feel it. And so then being able to be in that space, I bring that into my accessibility and my advocacy, because I can see the difference in access between the two camps, between the two experiences, and where there's, differences. And then, when I'm thinking first generation, it's about navigating the world and not having guides, not having models that have done what you've done. You're groundbreaking when you're first generation. And so, by being able to know that and operating in a system of school, education, no matter where you are, whether it's, an Ivy League school, community college, high school, you have to know the secret hidden curriculum, the secret things that are going to lead you to be successful. And if you don't know that, you're lost. And as a first generation person, I've seen how that's gone. And I've known those moments of like, I don't know what I have to do. I don't know who I'm supposed to talk to. I missed out on some opportunity because I just didn't even know, but other people knew about this, And so while I'm able to bring that in, I am able to really think about, okay, how can I be intentional about addressing these gaps? How can I bring myself into this realm and address that need that you may not even know you need, or somebody else? And being like that guide, making that change for certain students is really core. Making that change in the world is really core for me. And the low income part, that plays in so much to my own psychology, because, I'm resourceful. I'm at Yale, and, we have lots of resources. I've worked at USC with lots of resources, and you still have to think like, how do I manage this appropriately? So, while we may have all these resources, I'm over here like, what free tools can I find? Why? Because my whole life, when somebody's like, I want this, they're like, that costs too much. Or I go to get a service and it's like, oh, that service is $1,000. I don't have $1,000. I guess I'm not getting that service. I'm going to struggle. And by knowing how that experience is, it allows me to really put myself in the shoes of what other people are going to be navigating and trying to fill that space without me saying, oh, I know your experience, because everybody has a different experience, but still being able to say, you know what? I can feel that. And let me try and think about how to remove that barrier before you even need it. And that's really the core of what accessibility is just, I'm just here to remove barriers, whether you are biracial, regardless of how you identify in all of these spaces. My role is to take that barrier away.
All right. So in case you're wondering, the clean and chemical-free candles we only carry in our studio, they are from one of our proud sponsors, Modern Origins. When was the last time you truly paused? Not to scroll or plan, but just to breathe. At Modern Origins, they truly believe small rituals can make a big difference for your mind and your spirit. The handcrafted intention candles, bath soaks, and wax melts are made with clean ingredients, essential oils, and crystals designed to help you reconnect, release stress, and create moments of calm in your day. They're absolutely perfect for soaking in the bathtub after a trying day, having a quiet moment in meditation, journaling through a breakthrough, and even while watching our podcast. Modern Origins helps you turn self-care into something sacred. Visit modernoriginsus.com to build your ritual and get 15% off your first order with code CALM15. That's CALM15. modernoriginsus.com, because your healing deserves intention.
It goes back to us as humans being able to relate to each other and put ourselves in the same. When we humble ourselves and be able to actually relate to each other, then we're able to anticipate certain support needed for others. You know, and that's just being able to humble ourselves and say, okay, what is it like to walk in their shoes?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, everything that we do is relational.
Yeah, absolutely.
Every single thing that we do is relational, right? And so one of the things we were talking about earlier, and I can really appreciate that you were sharing your own intersecting identities, right? So we talk about intersectionality when it's two or more marginalized identities that interconnect, impacted by systems that are oppressive, right? And so I really can appreciate the fact that you're just like, I've had those lived experiences. I understand what that means and what that feels like. So what can I do? And how can I show up in spaces and do something different in that impact? So I can really appreciate what you're saying, because I too, that resonated because, you know, even in my own work as a clinic director, right, in my positionality, right? So even when we have intersecting identities, there's power, there's privilege, but there's also marginalized identities that I hold as a Black woman. And so how can I show up in spaces to make impact, right? Individually and systemically. So thank you for that. I can completely understand where you're coming from when you say that.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, like you mentioned, as like, you know, a clinical director, it's really, you are the instrument of change, like as much as you can be. And knowing that even when you step out of there, people are going to have viewpoints on you. Like I think about this all the time. Yeah. I work at Yale. I've worked at certain places. I have all these credentials, but there are many times where I'm walking around and I'm like, they don't know that.
Right.
And if they did know that, they would treat me so differently. And that's the problem.
Yeah.
And it's like, you know, when you can feel that and you know that and you have the power and you have privilege, but that privilege and power is stripped away just because you're not in the same environment, it makes you understand how to move and how to support.
Yeah, absolutely. What you think, you know?
It's percolated. See, I see it.
No, I'm thinking about intersectionalities, and the term you used was the I forget how you said it, but people have, you may be doing something, but people have perceived notions about you. Part of the issues too is that, yeah, you know, we understand that we can work hard and get to clinical director or working in a position at Yale, and people's opinion about you based on how you look can severely affect, they could affect you. Like I remember when I was at Yale and some guy says, well, you shouldn't park there. That's only for student parking. You know, I'm like, well, I am a student. Oh, yeah, right. You're not a student. What school you go to? I'm like, you know, and I have to explain myself. And so I also think about the intersectionality of race, gender, and ability and income. Right? So in schools, I primarily used to work in schools, and a tall, cutie pie, sweetheart of a black child, black male child. He's bigger than 7, but he is 7. He looks like he's 12, and he's on the spectrum. And that's who they're calling the cops on. She's a child.
12 is still a child.
Huh?
12 is still a child.
Right, right. That part too. But the demonization of the various intersections, or I forget what you said, the marginalized identity, is that the phrase you
Well, it is, right? So if I use myself as an example, right, just some of the identities that I'm Black and I'm a woman. They're not in isolation of each other. I can't just go outside and be Black. I can't just go outside and be a woman.
Yeah.
I'm going to be a Black woman always in who I am, right? Just like my sons, right? So I have Black sons. I have a Black husband, right? When they go out in the world, right, they're seen differently. We have different conversations in our counterparts about how the world sees them.
Right.
right?
So in the case of a kid who is in the, African diaspora, who faces either neurodiversity or some sort of disability, right? I know that there's a lot of parents who worry for their kids not to be, you know, shot by the cops, or sometimes the punishment that you get in school because of all these assumed identities, these assumed marginalized identities. Um, I wonder, what kind of advice do we give to the parents to love their kids through? You see what I'm saying?
Oh, yeah.
Through that
Hmm.
sort of thing. Cause that's always worried me, there's parents who will have kids who will be in their 40s and their parents are still taking care of their
Yep.
kids because of their disability. You know what I mean? And so I'm wondering, all of us are some sort of psychotherapists, or, from your historical, and Jana, I'm curious, what love letter, and I guess I'm going on a tangent. We're going to get back to you, Mr. Colbert. But I also wonder what love letter we can offer to those parents who have to, take care of such a beautiful soul that was born exactly how they were to fulfill a purpose in this world.
It kind of reminds me of going back to Lacar's interview, where she was talking about how what we say is mental, disability or whatever is actually a form of spiritual gift, and people who are designed to see the world differently are a different type of unique. And how do we as society embrace uniqueness that looks different?
Yeah. I think that was one of the questions you all had. I think that before I set out like number 6, question number 6, and to just to piggyback off of what you said, Chris, right, and tying it all in, how do we move from simply including people to actually valuing different ways of thinking and being? Because I feel like that's exactly.
That's exactly. That's exactly what I'm saying. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
It's a loaded question.
I mean, I think it's such a valuable question because of the way that it's poignant to humanity.
Mhm.
Really, we think about this as, okay, how do we support this person because of their diagnosis, because of their marginalization, because of X, Y, and Z. But in reality, we have to still kind of take a step back and say they're human. And by being human, the value exists. We don't have to look at it of the deficiency. So, there's a perspective of there's the medical model of disability where it's all about the diagnosis. You're deficient because of the diagnosis, and we need to change it. Yes. And then
There's
the
some layers.
social aspect of it, of like, how are you different, or how are you impacted by society? And what we really need to do is bring in that social model of like, no, we're all humans, so our value is inherent. This around us is what needs to change. And so moving from the idea of you are what we need to support, you are going to have the problems, it's going to be a difficult life for you. Thinking of it as, this is a different experience for humans. And how do we enrich the experience for all humans by having you in this? Because your value to the human experience is important. And so really shifting that mindset of thinking of like, not of it as a one-off, not of it as like, the minority, you're less than the 50% that we need, it's actually the value that adds, because we're not whole without it. If you're part of a minority, you still make up 49%. That's a large percent. That's a part of it. And even if you make up 0.001%, when we think about certain diagnoses of people where, it's such a rare incidence, you have a 1 in a billion chance of getting this diagnosis and you have it. What value does that add to the overall experience? Because now realistically, even in those like small things, your experience is more than just, oh, this is a data point. This is a reality. And that's what we need to really move this viewpoint from, of like, we have one shared reality to there are so many different realities that are happening. How can we all value all of them?
How do we compensate for that from a leadership perspective in our government, from a leadership perspective in our churches and centers and places of meaning and connection?
Medical centers.
There's so many different opportunities. And I feel like there's something, I'll kind of get to the heart of what I'm going to say, because I had a meeting this morning that was about how, I'll connect this really quickly. When we think about a couple years ago or a decade ago, we were talking about pre-existing conditions, right? And that can fall in so many different things, especially mental health. When we think about the mental health of generational trauma and the causation of generational trauma, let's get into it. You know, how do we talk about those pre-existing conditions?
God.
You know, how do we, from a leadership perspective, how do we build infrastructure of accountability within that? Because oftentimes when it's things that are tied to causation that happens oftentimes when it's not direct causation happening, it's easier for us to be able to build infrastructure to support or, you know, mend that need. And even then it's challenging. But when it's something that is directly caused as a relationship of our human experience from a certain group of people or a system, now it's, okay, we'll acknowledge it, we'll apologize for it, but there's no relationship and accountability for it.
I mean, well, that's a stretch too when you say we'll acknowledge it and
right, because acknowledge means to fully accept the accountability that goes along with.
Right.
But yeah.
But I think it starts with having the conversations about it.
Yes, 100%.
Call a thing and say what the thing is.
Yeah.
And that's how we start to disrupt the cycles and the dysfunction of what has happened.
Yes.
Genetics earlier.
We were.
Yeah.
Oh, that's one of my favorite topics.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we have to start having those this is how we do it right here. Realism and resilience right here. We start having those conversations, right? Lived experiences matter. If you want to meet me where I'm at, you got to understand where I came.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because if you don't, how do you help me?
Right.
How do you support me? How do you have any kind of awareness or understanding about what it is that I might do if you can't understand where I came from?
Right.
So I think really where you start like getting to the heart of how do you attack that? How do you change that? How do you build this? What it really is removing the layers of the facade. And so I think about that, and, you know, I say to everybody always says to themselves, if I had what they had, I would do it differently. But then so many people get to that point and they don't do it differently. And, you know, there's a reason for that.
Yeah.
And it's the facade. You know, we look at politicians, we look at leaders, and everybody always thinks that leader has, you know, is put together. That leader doesn't have problems. That leader doesn't have X, Y, and Z. And in reality, that leader is the same person you are. That leader started as a kid.
I love that you said that, and I'm smiling because as you're saying it, I have heard people say, like, I want to be like this person. I want to. You don't even know what it took for them to get there.
Yeah.
Right.
You have no idea.
No.
The cost of success.
What it took for me to get where I was.
Yes. Yeah. And, you know, pulling back the facade on this of like, and just saying, I deal with this. You know, it's very powerful because you see celebrities start to do this all the time. They've been doing this for the last, 20, 30 years, really, about the way that they are open with what happens to them, their struggles. You know, they pull back the lens and say like, yeah, I have mental health issues. They pull back and say, oh, almost like one of the most famous things is like we learned FDR, the president FDR had polio. We found that out, and he hid it all through his presidency. Why? Because people didn't think somebody with polio in a wheelchair could be a president. Turns out, yes, they could. He was one of the best presidents. Yeah, he won more than anybody else.
Yeah.
But the thing is because people saw the facade and thought the facade was the truth.
Yeah.
And, as we start pulling this back, and I'm recognizing this, as I'm coming up through my own leadership journey, gaining leadership positions in just different realms and actually recognizing who I am, it's like, no, your story and the truth is real. When you're standing up there and you're, giving a speech, you're sitting here giving a podcast, if you're not authentic, if you're thinking, what's the polished response that I'm supposed to be giving?
Mm-hmm.
And you're not able to really align
Your
yourself,
truth. Mm-hmm.
you know, and if your truth is not what you're speaking,
Yeah.
but it's like, okay, you were told you can't talk about this subject. And, you know, if I feel like I'm not supposed to actually talk about that subject, or I need, or let's change that. If I feel like I need to talk about that subject, but somebody has told me you can't talk about that subject, you know, am I really showing up authentically? You know, no, I'm putting the button up on and I'm doing what I'm supposed to be said. And that furthers this idea of, no, you know, you're a talking piece. And, you know, I want to be honest, like you have to have tact. You have to go about things in the right way. You can't just always say what you think in the right moment. But the real thing about a leader is not only like leading by example, but it's also being authentic and knowing when to speak, when not to speak.
And that's discernment.
Yes.
But sorry, really quick. For someone who is like neurodivergent, especially on the autistic spectrum, doesn't do any of that masking and censoring and stuff like that. How do we, I guess one of the questions is how do we make room for that, and how do we help folks who are on the spectrum navigate a world that values you kind of conforming?
That is that is a very hard question. It's hard because you're attacking the ideas of society. You're attacking the fabric that society has been built on.
Yep.
When you're looking at this and, you know, somebody who has autism who is like, you know, I'm being asked about to join somebody's lab, or I'm being asked to produce an academic article about something I don't care about. And, you know, I'm supposed to sit here and you're asking me questions. And in reality, my first thought is, I don't care. You know, think about it. And it's hard. That's actually where things like psychotherapy and behavioral training come in play, is because, you know, that may be the truth, but you actually have to get an idea of how to say your truth, you know, and you get the coaching. This is about the support, because you attack that social dynamic, that social norm, by building support for the people who do it differently. Because when the people who do it differently start actually entering the space, it's no longer you do this differently. This is just the way that this operates. And, you know, it's not the same as the way that operates, but you're in the space. And that's a key part of why everybody's like, yo, can we just get to the table? And somebody's like, well, why do you want to be at the table if you're not eating? It's because I'm at the table and you now have to say, oh, we got this space at the table.
But some people are strategically removed from the table too. Some people get there, they are authentically trying to do the thing, and then they're removed from the table because they're no longer producing or assimilating in a way that makes their role recognized or distinguished in the same way others are. Case in point, I'm the director of an organization in a department of the organization. We do what we do authentically, unapologetically, but because the narrative is being controlled and funding is being institutionally denied because of how we're doing things, not because it's wrong, it just removes the institution that's funding us from the ability to control the narrative because it's contrary. It's more informed, actually, but that does not align with the narrative trying to be perpetuated. So it's actually challenging the institution itself to confront the ugliness of its past into a space where we actually have to make room for more diversity of thought and people who fall within that, the collateral. And so our chair has literally been removed because we're authentically in the space. So it's like, what do you do in those cases where now it's like, okay, now we have to ask private donors for funding now.
So you took the words out of my mouth. You got to start building your own table.
Yeah, you have to.
That's exactly it.
It's slow
Yeah.
and steady. You start building your own table
Mm-hmm.
because that's not the only table. It's not the only room.
Right.
Yeah. But also something like right in there, not even a but, it's an also. Like when you were speaking about the table and getting your seat removed, like, let's carry that metaphor. At functions, there's an adult table, there's a kid table, right?
Mhm.
Why is there a kid table? Because the kids at the adult table don't act right, right? Don't act right. I put air quotes because it's, I don't want to actually have to confront that. I'd rather you be over there. You can act however you want over there. But you know what? The cultures that are most successful, the institutions that are most successful are the ones that say, actually, sit at this table, act up, because when we have to include your experience in here, you grow and we grow. As opposed to putting it to the side and saying, you know what? You be you in your lane, we'll be us in our lane, and we'll keep things running the right way. Nothing changes. You sit down, you have dinner in separate spaces for the rest of the time. But, when you bring that back in, the dinner conversation gets more important, because you figured out a way to bring that in there. And private donors building your own table. I was also thinking, they took the chair away, I'll stand, or if
I need that on a shirt.
even thinking about accessibility, I'll roll up to the table. You don't got a part for me. I'll roll up and make my own part.
My own chair.
Mm-hmm.
I love that. Yeah.
Sorry,
That's so
interrupt.
core.
That was really good, though.
No.
Sometimes people think excessive tech. I don't know what's wrong with me.
It's hard.
Assistive.
Sometimes people think assistive technology only benefits disabled individuals, but accessibility often helps everyone standing at the table, rolling up to the table. Can you speak on that?
Yeah. So it's actually pretty funny because most assistive technology is actually made for some other purpose that then gets recognized. Oh, this actually benefits people with disabilities in a much bigger way. And so, we think about like realistically, so many people know Siri. So many people know Alexa. Think about how that helps people who don't have arms, who can't type, or maybe who can't spell. When you say, like, you press that little microphone button and you start talking into your computer, your phone, and it's dictating for you, that's assistive technology. But you know what? That benefits everybody. And so there's this concept of universal design, which was made by like architectures, because there was architects who were like, I want people to see my building, but not everybody could get in because we got stairs, or not everybody can get into this environment. So let's make it so everybody could come in and experience this, because I want to be more famous. It was originally it was an idea of like, oh, okay, how can I get my work more recognized? But realistically, what it's shown is that there's a way to make it so people don't have to, worry about their differences. You don't have to spend time on the internet looking to see, is there a ramp for me to get into this building? Or if you have a child who has autism and sensory overloads are happening, is there, headphones available at this movie theater? Is there a separate space at my church where my child can go when the ceremony is getting overwhelming? You don't have to think about that because it's there. And so this idea of universal design is really where assistive technology comes into play, with making things available and better for everyone.
Right.
Like a big thing that I love as somebody who also has ADHD, like focusing on reading and, with my visual disability, literally sitting down to see the font can be just excruciating for me. So I listen to books, but you know what? I do that because that's the way that I learn better now. But people who are busy on the go, you spend all day in your car driving, if you're an Uber driver, if you're a bus driver, if you're someone else, you could literally be learning in those moments. And so it's like, that's better for everybody. And those kind of things are really, when you look at the assistive technology, they intersect and support the world.
So we are so grateful for the time you've spent with us, opening our audiences in our minds to ways we can be more accessible, and not only for others but for ourselves.
Yeah.
If people want to find your work, where can they find you?
Yeah, so you can always, reach out to me. My email's on Yale's website, but it's my first name dot last name at Yale.edu. I'm happy to talk with people. And there's always ways that you can find me on LinkedIn. I'm there. That's a great way to really connect with me. I don't spend too much time on social media, so X and Twitter, it's bad for just. Yeah, I open it up and I get anxiety sometimes. But, when people want to connect with me, you can find me there. It's at JOCOATP. So there's a lot of different ways to find me. But I guess the best way really to find me, probably LinkedIn. And I'll get back to you, in the medium that works for you.
One last question, one last thought, or if you can say it in, I don't know, one word or whatever. What is your love letter or your adult to Black and brown persons navigating disability or neurodiversity? Do you have a special love note for them or their families?
Yeah, I think about this and I have a couple. So the first one I would say is you are valued. Like, you deserve this. You deserve nice things. And that's something that my friends say all the time. This is why we can't have nice things, but it doesn't matter. You deserve nice things by the nature of being a person and being valued. And then the second thing, it's kind of silly, but the idea, I just watched this for the first time, the movie Frozen.
Mm-hmm.
Let it go. And it's hard to say that because in many cases, it's this is my existence. This is, there's so many things weighing me down. It's so hard. People don't get me. But you know what? You cannot let them win. And letting it go and pushing forward is what really will make that happen.
This has been such an enriching conversation, and it sounds like we got a t-shirt coming. I don't need the chair for the table, I'll stand. I love that. I love that.
Well, I would say, I don't need the seat at the table. I'll roll up.
I'll have you present at the table when I stand up. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Mm.
But this has been really informative, enriching, and I hope that folks that are watching this can really take away some of the information that you have provided, some of the lived experiences that you have talked about. Because I'm all about application. You know what I mean? It's like when I think about accessibility, intersectionality, what that means, how it shows up, what my own lived experiences are. And I think you just said it best as you're wrapping up. You matter, you deserve, to have the very best.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that if people don't take nothing else, and I'm sure they'll take a lot, those are really the points that we want to drive home. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
I appreciate you.
Thank you for having me. This has been great.
I am the fruit of their